giving a talk, and it should be quite interesting. Fred's going to be moderating that. We pretty much don't have much of any. This is going to be probably the easiest introduction and work I've ever had to do since I've been in the club when we've had a meeting. So anything you've got, Jeff, that you want to talk about?
Yeah, we're going to have a Starbucks card giveaway. So as the meeting progresses, I'll be using my magic unbiased die here to eliminate people until we have one winner. And that'll be announced at the end. Got to stick it out to find out.
Okay, the one with the biggest smile wins. That's how it works here. Okay, so anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Fred, you're going to be doing this, so please introduce our guest speaker. This should be a lot of fun tonight.
Okay, very good. So we have, let's see, it looks like we have 23 participants, which is a really good sign. This is our first official run. We did a dry run last month, and apparently it worked pretty good. So I was on a conference call today with people that normally do this, and they didn't really have even as smooth a start as we've had. So I'm encouraged by people that are trying this for the first time will pull this off without a hitch. What I want to bring up to everybody is there is a chat box. If you move your mouse, you'll see it says chat comes up at the bottom. If you click on that, you can enter questions there. And then as Molly's going through finishing up her presentation, we can bring up the questions to her, okay? All right, so what we're gonna do here, Molly Wakeling is a graduate student in physics from the University of California, Berkeley, studying neutrinos. Wow. And holds a bachelor's degree in physics from Washington State University. She is an avid astrophotographer for the last 4.5 years and was vice president of her previous astronomy club. And now is a member of the East Bay Astronomical Society. Yes, I was a member, I've been a member since 1973. Molly's also a Girl Scout troop leader, and alluded to the fact that she also has capabilities to teach the Astronomy Merit Badge, which I've done. That would include also something having to do with weather and anything else that is related to astronomy. And she's contributed more than 100 hours of astronomy outreach to more than 1,000 members of the public, which is fantastic. If you're not friends with her on Facebook or Instagram, I recommend you friend her. There's always something unusual she's posting. I know yesterday, was it yesterday you posted the North American Nebula, I believe it was. Pretty fantastic picture, shot from El Cerrito, California. Heavily light polluted, Bortle 7, Bortle 8 skies, and just a really, really cool image. Molly had the chance in 2019 to travel to Chile for an astronomy trip, and she went with a couple of friends from her previous astronomy club. She went down there for 2.5 weeks, and as you know, the Atacama Desert is very high, very dry, and has some fantastic skies. I don't know if I'll ever get there in my lifetime, but as long as I can live vicariously through people like Molly, I will think it has been a good trip. So she's going to share that trip. It's a little more than what I did on my summer vacation. So with that, people, I want to introduce Molly Wakeling. There you go, Molly.
Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me to come talk. And I've been into astronomy for actually now it's just about 5 years now. It was 4.5 back when I wrote this. I was originally supposed to speak at the March meeting, but actually I think the 5th year anniversary is coming up in like next week. I've been keeping a log since my very first night out with my telescope, so that's how I know the exact date. Highly recommend keeping a log, by the way. Yeah, so there was a couple people in my astronomy club in the Midwest that were gonna go down to Chile, and they had one person drop out of the group, so I swooped in and took that spot and got to have a really, really incredible trip of a lifetime to see both the dark skies of Chile and the solar eclipse that occurred in South America last July. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Oh, you have to enable screen sharing for me. Sorry, I should have checked that earlier. Yeah, well, while he's doing that, I'm just to finish my first year at Berkeley, and it's a little rough, but I've got good classmates to help me out, and it's been a good time. I've joined a neutrino experiment group that is on the detector called Snow Plus up in Canada, and I've been working on a warm-up project on trying to separate solar neutrino signal from background signals.
Let me interrupt real quick. Molly, Jerry, you're going to have to enable screen sharing for Molly.
Oh, it's enabled now.
Okay, great.
Okay. Share my PowerPoint here. Alrighty. So does that come through good?
It looks great.
Okay. Yeah. So this was a little over a 2.5 week trip, and well, a little over 2 weeks. And I'm going to talk about how, like, some of the considerations for what gear I brought and how I packed it, and then just all the fun that we got to have, and the solar eclipse and the dark skies and where we stayed and stuff like that. So there we go. Do this on present. Okay. So why Chile? So a quick map here on where Chile is, if you're less familiar. It's a really long strip of land down the side of the western side of South America, and it covers pretty much the entire coastline of almost half the continent. So really long, narrow country. The first reason why we decided to go to Chile was for the solar eclipse. The entire country was going to see some part of the eclipse, and there's some towns right along the path of totality that we were going to make our way towards. There is incredible dark skies of the Atacama Desert, which is high altitude, driest desert on the planet. So we get to do some really awesome dark sky astronomy in addition to the solar eclipse. And that sweet, sweet southern hemisphere view, that all the stuff we don't get to see from up here up north. Magellanic Clouds, the Eta Carina Nebula, Omega Centauri, all those things. You get to go see what the southern half of the Milky Way looks like, and what the core of the Milky Way looks like when it's directly over your head instead of down on the horizon. And of course, all the big telescopes that are down there too, taking advantage of those guys. All right, so a quick run through of what our trip looked like. We flew out of Dallas to Santiago, which is the capital of Chile. It's kind of right in the middle, north-south wise of the country. We spent a couple days in Santiago, and then we flew from Santiago down to La Serena, from where we saw the solar eclipse. We were there for several days. Then we did a road trip up to San Pedro de Atacama, which is a town near where we stayed for all of our dark nights doing the Atacama astronomy bonanza. Just an incredible couple of nights of amazing skies. All right, so let me talk about the gear loadout first, because when you're flying and when you're going to a foreign country, you have to think carefully about what you're going to bring, because you can't just necessarily bring your entire telescope rig. It's too heavy, there's too much, it's not worth losing it. So there was several considerations that I had to think about. What was I going to pack in my checked bag and risk potential loss? What was I going to pack in my carry-on bag that I could carry and still be able to fit other things? So let me go through that. So what I ended up bringing was, I have a Skywatcher Star Adventurer mount, which is a little DSLR tracker, and the whole thing can fit very conveniently into a little camera backpack. In addition to the Star Adventurer, I brought as a backup my Vixen Polary, which is another little star tracker. I don't like the Polary quite as much as I like the Star Adventurer, but it was a good backup just in case, because I was not going to miss imaging the solar eclipse for sure. I brought both of my DSLRs. I have a Nikon D3100 and a Nikon D5300. And those I just put, all the cameras I put in the bottom of my carry-on backpack. And then I put the backpack with the mounts in it into my carry-on suitcase. In addition to that, I brought down my ZWO ASI 1600mm Pro, which is a monochrome astro camera that's cooled. And I brought that one down because I was going to get to rent a telescope at the Atacama Lodge where we stayed the second week for doing dark sky astronomy. I also brought up there in the corners a picture of the solar filter that I brought for doing the partial phases. It's just like a piece of Mylar. Somebody gave it to me with another telescope that I used to have, a 76mm Borg. And I just lined it with bubble wrap in order to fit it over the lens of my camera nice and snug. I brought a couple of lenses. So I brought my 70 to 300mm Nikon lens for imaging the eclipse itself. I recently acquired a 35mm f1.8 Nikon lens, which is, it's got a lot of optical aberration and stuff like that, but it was a cheap, fast lens just to kind of see what I could do with it and do some really cool, fast, wide field Milky Way type stuff. So I had to bring a tripod as well to put the camera on. So for that, I found this carbon fiber tripod that folds up into a nice, neat little 2-foot long package, and it doesn't weigh hardly anything. So I was able to pack that into my checked bag. An intervalometer to control the camera for when I was out doing the dark sky stuff, because then I could use my tablet to control the telescope I was going to rent. I had to bring lots of lithium batteries. So lithium batteries to power the Star Adventurer, an extra battery to power my tablet, and of course all the camera lithium batteries. Those all had to go in my carry-on bag, so additional stuff to haul around. I have a little Windows Surface 3 tablet. It doesn't weigh hardly anything. It has a battery life of something like 8 hours, and it is the perfect little itty-bitty machine to run telescopes and cameras. So I've really enjoyed using that, and it's really convenient to carry along somewhere. And then here's a shot of when I'm out in the Atacama Desert of the Skywatcher Star Adventurer all put together out there, and I will talk more about that when we get there. All right, so first stop was Santiago. So we spent just 2 days there waiting for our flight to La Serena. We did a little bit of exploring around Santiago. It's an old city, a lot of Spanish architecture, a lot of really cool museums and restaurants and historical sites. We went to this pre-Columbian Museum of Art that had a lot of really neat artifacts in it. It sampled much of the local fare, including lengua. And this is probably the most lengua I've ever had. You could definitely get the feeling that you were eating a tongue as opposed to some other lengua I've had where it's a little less obvious. But good cultural experience, worth a try. The national drink of Chile is the pisco sour, and pisco is a type of brandy, something like that. It's distilled alcohol, and the funny thing is that so I've also been to Peru, and I've also had pisco sours there, and both Chile and Peru declare that pisco sour is their national drink, is their heritage. And both claim that theirs is superior to the other countries. I do have to say that I liked the Chilean pisco sours better than I liked the Peruvian pisco sours, although I was only 19 when I went to Peru, so I don't think my alcohol taste had quite developed yet by that point. So maybe it was just a matter of that. One of the fun things to do in Santiago is this, there's a tram that goes up to this really tall hill in the middle of the city. The tram is called the Funicular, sort of whimsical little name. And at the top, there's some shops, there's some shrines and a church and some spiritual sites and stuff like that. And also a really incredible view of Santiago in all of its dense population and all of its smog. It's a city of 5.6 million. So, and it's just that urban sprawl going all out, and it was really quite an interesting place. We didn't get to explore very much of it though before we made our way to La Serena. So La Serena is a small-ish, not really that small, coastal town up north of Santiago. I've got a little map there showing that. We stayed at, it's called a hostel, Hostal a Punto, but there were like individual rooms that you could stay in, and it was just this really cute little hotel, and that had like an outside, just kind of hanging out area, and they had a little cafeteria, and they cooked all 3 meals a day, and it was just a really cute little spot. And we booked it like 2 years before the eclipse, so we got it for a really good rate before everybody started upcharging for the eclipse. So that worked out really nicely.
I tried that in Los Angeles every time.
While we were in La Serena waiting for the eclipse, because we were there for a couple days beforehand, we got our first look at the southern sky. It was cloudy the whole time we were in Santiago, so got to La Serena, it cleared out, and we got our first look. So I brought out a pair of just handheld binoculars. The bright thing in the middle there is Jupiter, way up high, like at zenith. It was totally crazy. You can kind of see the Milky Way there a little bit. We spotted several constellations. Saw the Southern Cross, spotted Alpha Centauri, and we saw the Omega Centauri globular cluster, which if you've been to the Texas Star Party or Winter Star Party, you have probably seen, but of course in South America, it's much higher in the sky. So that was really easy to spot with binoculars. It was really strange to see Scorpius and the teapot being upside down. It was actually kind of hard to find them at first. The Arc to Arcturus and Spike to Spica were reversed. So trying to kind of figure out where we're at in the sky. Looked at we spotted the constellations Pavo, Volans, and Lupus. And sort of the really strange thing about the southern hemisphere too is that the sun moves across the northern sky instead of the southern sky. So you just kind of implicitly are used to the sun being in the south, and that's how you kind of orient yourself when you're outside. And we had to reorient ourselves differently with the sun being in the north, and it was just kind of wild. I processed that image to be able to pull out a little more of the Milky Way, and it was really neat just to see the Milky Way, the main part of the Milky Way being way up high in the sky. So we were going to have some awesome adventures yet to come. One of the other things we did before the eclipse in La Serena was we went inland to Elqui Valley, which is where a lot of pisco distilleries are. So we went to one of the distilleries and had some good quality pisco sours, as well as some delicious food. Now, all of the stores and all of the restaurants, everybody was having eclipse specials. So this is their special version of pisco for the eclipse that they were unveiling just for the special occasion. Now, in the U.S., when we had the U.S. eclipse, it was the word was spread pretty well through news networks and through astronomy clubs and social media and things like that. But Chile took this to like the next level. There probably wasn't even a dog in the entire country that didn't know the eclipse was coming. It was absolutely everywhere. This is just a random like sign on the beach in La Serena, like a light post sign. These were absolutely everywhere. This was a grocery bag that was advertising the eclipse for the town of Vicuña. was a spot that a lot of people were going to go to. It was on trash cans. Advertising when the eclipse was going to be, and just making sure absolutely everybody knew about it. And this has been going on for so long that it had worked its way into the local culture as well. So this is a shot of a soccer game, a football game, and it says Colombia failed to eclipse the red being the Chilean national team, with eclipse in quotes, because that's all everybody was talking about at that time, of course. So it was fun to see how it kind of worked itself into the psyche of everybody. So while we were in the Elqui Valley, we swung by the only observatory we were able to actually make it to. All the other observatories had been booked up for a long, long time in advance. We weren't able to get any tour slots, and a lot of the observatory tour slots they'd set aside for locals anyway, which was probably a good thing, but it meant that we ended up missing out on some of the cooler observatories down there. So this is the Mamayuka Observatory is actually like an amateur outreach type facility, but you know, we had to swing by at least something called an observatory while we were down there, right? So we went up there and we got to hang out in a parking lot that was just down the hill from the observatory and see some of our first dark skies of Chitney. So we spent a couple hours after dark hanging out there with binoculars and just like our DSLRs on little tripods and just enjoying the dark skies and seeing all the new constellations and seeing the Milky Way way up above our heads. I did bring my one of my Vixen Polary star tracker with me to try and take some long exposure shots, but polar alignment in the southern hemisphere is really difficult, so I didn't really get any good shots that night. But I did get quite a few nice like wide field shots of looking down over the city of Vicuña and us posing for pictures and things like that. So that was a lot of fun, just using that 35mm lens that I brought along. We saw Southern Cross, the really bright star Canopus, Jupiter, Mars, the Large Magellanic Cloud just before it set, Eta Carina, the Coalsack Nebula, the Jewel Box Cluster, just all kinds of stuff. All the Southern Hemisphere highlights through a pair of handheld binoculars. Still in La Serena, the day before the eclipse, we went on a boat tour of this reserve, this wildlife reserve that extended up off the coast. There's a cold current that runs up the coast, and it's called the Humboldt Current, and a lot of penguins make their home there, these Humboldt penguins, even that far north. We're talking like 29 latitude. There was penguins living there, which was just totally wild. So I put my long camera lens that I was going to use for the eclipse to another good use in imaging all these fun creatures. So there's a couple of the Humboldt penguins there on the rock. We got a closer view of some of the penguins. Got a really close view of a couple of dolphins, which was really cool. It was the first time seeing them like in the wild. This is a colorful bird called a cormorant that has this really bright piercing blue eyes and really colorful feet and beak. All manner of birds, just really, really cool creatures. Finally got a little bit closer to the penguins and got some even better shots. So that was a really fun trip the day before the eclipse. And then finally it was eclipse day. So we ended up booking a tour for the eclipse instead of trying to figure out where we were going to go with a tour company that had that was going to have a spot all set up and stuff like that and take us there, so we didn't have to worry about all of that, and that ended up being really good. So we got up really early in the morning to get on the van that would take us up to the village of La Higuera, where we would see the eclipse from. So La Higuera is just this little tiny village off the highway, and it kind of became a real hot spot for the eclipse. It was right on the center line or very, very close to it. Just kind of a large open space that was far enough back from the hills that were between it and the ocean to be able to see the sun, but far enough away from the ocean to not have to worry about fog and clouds and stuff like that. So it was a good spot. There were celebrities in that location as well. We heard that Bill Gates was there, but they were kind of set up away from all of us rabble over in their own little encampment area. Pretty sure they came by helicopter, you know, all those fancy things. This is the rig that I had set up for the eclipse. And so that's the Skywatcher Star Adventurer on that carbon fiber mount. I got this mount, this tripod bag that I put a bunch of rocks in to stabilize it. And I have my 300mm lens on my DSLR there, and I got it polar aligned using my cell phone. So I used a compass on my cell phone to get it pointed south, and then there's like a tilt meter using the accelerometer that would give me the altitude. So I was able to get it well enough polar. I mean, I only really had to track for 2.5 minutes, right? The rest of the time I could just make adjustments in between sets of exposures during the partial phases. And I only had to adjust it like twice. It tracked it reasonably well. So just kind of give a lay of the land of that site. The tour company had a whole site laid out for all the people who were on their tours that day. And they had water and a barbecue and tents set up for shade and a TV with a map of the eclipse and things like that. And there were a lot of tourists and also a lot of locals who were on that tour as well. So I got to, we were the only ones there with like equipment. Most people just came with themselves, maybe 1 or 2 DSLRs, some tripods here and there. So we got a lot of attention of people asking how our equipment worked and how we were doing all this, and that was really exciting. And I was explaining things intermittently in English and Spanish, and it was just kind of a fun language mishmash. A wider view of the site. There was a lot of people there, but it was also very spread out because it's just a huge open, empty area. Inside the town of La Higuera, because they were going to be getting so many people there, they actually had this monument built for the eclipse as like a kind of a permanent town monument. And you can see there's a massive pair of eclipse glasses. Cool. And those are actually pointed at the altitude that the sun was going to be at totality. And so you could actually see it from there. And then I think the big black rock is supposed to be the eclipsed sun. And yeah, just this whole monument in this little tiny poor village. It was really cool to see. And finally, after a long day of waiting, the eclipse began. So this is one of the partial phases. It's pink because of that Mylar filter as we're heading toward totality. One of the things I was doing in addition to talking about my equipment was kind of doing some outreach with a lot of the locals who were there who didn't really know a whole lot about the science of the eclipse. So I found there was a chair that had holes in it that somebody was sitting on that I tilted to kind of show the crescent shadow. I had to go Google a bunch of words for how to say these things in Spanish. And was just like explaining all these things to the people around. This is a young boy who he saw that I had my DSLR and he wanted to figure out some way that maybe he could capture the partial phases as well. So we took a pair of solar glasses, cut them up and put it on the middle of his lens and then covered the rest of the lens in other pieces of the solar glasses so that there wasn't any extra light coming in. So then he could safely take pictures of the partial phases and also look through the viewfinder. Now this was like an 18mm lens, so it's actually less than 1x magnification, so there's no real risk of burning yourself out there, but it'll allow him to see the partial phases and keep extra safe and stuff like that. So that was fun to kind of help him out and enhance his experience of the eclipse. I got to work on my Spanish a little bit too. So we're getting closer now to totality, just this little crescent left. The light quality was sort of getting, it's almost like an overcast day, but without any clouds. If you haven't seen an eclipse, it's sort of wild, the way the quality of the light changes. And then finally, we're just before second contact, and I pulled the solar filter off my camera I was running an app on my phone that was announcing all the timings for stuff. So I was repeating it out loud for everybody there in English and Spanish, and I pulled off the solar filter and started getting some images just before totality. And then we have Bailey's beads here. And in the final seconds, I didn't even have to count down. Such a noise went up from all the people there. It was a starkly different experience from what I'd had when in 2017, I went to the Astronomical League's convention in Wyoming, and they had set up sites for the convention attendees. So I was there watching the eclipse with a whole bunch of other astronomers. And during totality, it was dead silent. Everybody was just focused on observing it or imaging it or just being there in the moment. It was silence. but not here. This was just a bunch of people, and there was just this great shout and all this noise. Everybody was just amazed at how it suddenly became just very dark, and the landscape around totally changing, and this just being a really, when you look at the sun hanging up there, it's like this black ball and this little cloud of white. It's really kind of otherworldly, and just really incredible to experience if you haven't experienced an eclipse before. So this is one of the longer exposures I took during totality. My camera ended up going slightly out of focus when I took off the solar filter, not because I didn't take down the focuser, but because I didn't take down the zoom. That was a rookie mistake there. I did take down the focuser, but the zoom slid back a little bit, and that brought it a little bit out of focus. But it was still close enough to focus that I got a nice composite image, which I'll show later. But yeah, so kind of a nice view of the corona here. Now, the 2017 eclipse, well, for both of these, I had the Backyard Nikon app running my camera with a script that I had very carefully planned and timed out well in advance and had practiced over and over again. So I didn't have to do anything. I just hit start and it ran on its own. And in the 2017 eclipse, I did what everybody said for your first eclipse, which is to just enjoy it, just watch it and observe it and take everything in. And that eclipse really felt like the full 2.5 minutes because I was just there kind of absorbing it, not trying to do other things. This eclipse, I was using my cell phone to kind of capture video of just what was going on around me. I had my other DSLR and I was taking some wide field shots. And this time, they say that an eclipse feels like it's only 8 seconds long. And this time I definitely experienced that. It really felt like it was only 8 seconds long. It went by so fast because I was doing these other things. So before I knew it, we were at third contact, and the first of Bailey's beads on the other side was coming back. So I got a few nice shots of that and diamond ring, and some of the chromosphere starting to come back there. And then it was over. I had to put the solar filter back on, and we stayed the rest of the time to watch it come out of the partial phase. But that was the end of the really fun part. This is one of the, I am glad that I did do the wide field shots with a handheld DSLR, because I got this really cool shot that is actually, I think, a good approximation of what the sky looked like, how dark it was, and how bright the corona was, and how much of a black hole the sun was just there in the middle. This is one of my favorite shots that I took. And like I mentioned, actually before I started the talk, I was talking about sometimes the exposures that you don't think are the ones that are going to turn out well. This one was it was on the lower side of my bracketing. Actually turned out to be my favorite exposure. So I'm glad I did bracketing and took a whole bunch of different exposures for that one. I did not bring a processing computer with me because I didn't want to risk losing my fancy laptop, and I didn't want to carry it. It was just a lot to have to deal with. So I didn't process this until I got back home. But I processed it using the same technique I did for the 2017 one, which is actually a pretty old Photoshop technique that was developed in like the late 90s. People were still transferring film into Photoshop. And you can, you're basically doing high dynamic range, where I've taken this is 10 exposures ranging from 1/4000th of a second to get the core, like the really brightest part of the corona, out to, I think, 4 seconds. Was it 1 second or 4 seconds was my longest exposure, to get the outer edges of the corona there and a couple of stars there in the background. Now, if you saw pictures or saw the 2017 eclipse, you can see that the corona were quite different between the two. And as unactive as the sun was in 2017, it's even less active in the last year, which anybody who sun watches knows. We've had very few suns back. I think we had something like 300 days without a single sunspot this year, or last year, something like that. And you can see that lack of activity in the shape of the corona here. It's very ordered. We have a nice, just the magnetic field lines coming out of the north and south, very kind of spherically, and then out of the east and west, a little more structure, a little more chaos, but really not very chaotic at all. Those magnetic field lines moving those charged particles around. So really kind of fascinating to compare the shape and distribution of the corona between the two eclipses and how it connects to the activity of the sun. And one of the last shots of the day, actually the partial phase was still going on when the sun set behind the hills there. So I got a really cool shot of the partially eclipsed sun setting behind a hill. So that was really cool. And we had just a fantastic sunset with this gorgeous hill shadow and the partially eclipsed sun just behind the hill there. And then it was time to join the great Chilean traffic jam. So maybe kind of hard to see in this picture, but it snakes forward for many miles all the way back to La Serena, and we joined this long caravan. Now in the US, I'm sure you've seen people, when you're in like a long line on the highway that's all locked up traffic, people love to just jump into the shoulder and zoom down, right? Nobody was doing this really in Chile. So a couple other Americans and myself on the tour bus kind of egged the tour bus driver on to hop into the shoulder and do the American thing and just zip down the shoulder. And he was like all about it. He was so excited about this idea. So we did that and probably shaved a good hour off of our time at least. But we still got back at like 10:30, 11 p.m. or something like that. It was just a crazy amount of traffic. All right, and then that's the end of our time in La Serena, and we hit the road to drive up to the Atacama Desert. Now the Atacama Desert is 41,000 square miles of desert. It's the driest desert, the driest true desert in the world, tied for super desert status with the McMurdo Dry Valleys of Antarctica. And it's caught in between a double rain shadow of the Chilean coastal mountains on the west, in the west, and the Andes in the east. So moisture from both oceans, the Pacific and Atlantic, is being blocked by both those mountain ranges. So it's just extremely dry. In addition to that is the specific anticyclone that's kind of fueled by that cold Humboldt current that I mentioned before, and this all adds up to make an extremely dry place. But the average rainfall is only ½ an inch a year, and in some locations, only 4 to 6/100 of an inch a year. And there are actually some places in the Atacama Desert that, looking at soil samples and things like that, have had no appreciable rainfall for at least the last 500 years. It's just totally crazy, just an extremely dry desert. In fact, it's so dry that there's some parts of it that are actually like dead. There's no organisms in the soil. And NASA uses some of these sites to test Mars missions and future spacecraft and things like that. So just a really just kind of wild place. Because it's so dry, there's a lot of observatories there, and this is the European Southern Observatory's Paranal site. We didn't get to actually go up there, but we did get to hang out in front of the guard shack and take some cool pictures. And sorry, my cat's climbing onto my lap right now. And just kind of see the very large telescope, as it's called, up there, because astronomers are really great at naming telescopes. It's really unique and clever names, like the Very Large Telescope and the Extremely Large Telescope, and all, you know how it is. So yeah, the Atacama Desert, it really just did look like you were on the moon. It was just completely wild. You're used to thinking of like the American Southwest, where you have shrubs and lizards and Wile E. Coyote and roadrunners, stuff like that. But out here, it was just dead, just absolutely nothing. It was just really crazy and a little bit unsettling. In fact, we got out of the car just to kind of absorb it for a bit, and it was complete and utter silence. Like, even when you're in your house without any music playing and stuff, you still have the sound of cars and your HVAC system and your computer and things like that. But out here it was just complete and utter silence, and it was just totally eerie. More views on the road trip, kind of seeing finally getting sight of some of the mountains on the other side. And then we finally made it after 2.5 days to the Atacama Lodge, which is this kind of like hotel / observatory that's out just south of the town of San Pedro de Atacama. It's run by this French expat named Alain Mari, who was, he was with the European Southern Observatory. He was a technician, and got tired of the light pollution of France and all the politics, and had spent enough time in Chile working on the telescopes that he just finally moved out there and set up shop with his couple of telescopes. And since then, he's built a whole array of Dobsonians, and every night he hosts busloads of people on tours of the sky in 3 different languages of this really dark site out in the Atacama Desert. You can actually, there's a couple of like these adobe houses there, these little cabins that you can rent and stay there and use his telescopes over the course of however long you want to stay there. So that's what we did, rented a cabin, and I got to spend a whole week looking at the dark skies. So that's the Andes Mountains over there. That's an active volcano. Over there, there's a lot of earthquakes in that area that sometimes send water down the mountains and washing out roads and stuff. Just really, really cool place. A little more, there's some groundwater in this part of the desert, so there's more wildlife and more shrubs and things like that. There's also, this is the area where those famous salt plateaus are, of just these huge like salt formations, and we went out and drove to one of those too. It was really cool. Here is kind of the main area where he does his nightly observatory shows and or nightly sky tours, and his whole, I like to call sunflower field of telescopes. Just a whole bunch of telescopes there. And he actually does remote hosting for people as well. He's got, there's a shed over there on the right and several observatory domes where people have remote imaging setups there. In fact, that white refractor that you may or not be able to see there in that roll-off shed belongs to the guy who wrote the Backyard Nikon and Backyard EOS software from the telescope. So that was cool to find out. Necessary picture holding the group photo sign, but they got the crescent moon up in the background too, which was really cool. Now, since this is after the eclipse, we of course had some moon on some of the nights as it was waxing. So this is a moonlight shot of us using one of his telescopes. And you can see the southern Milky Way there. I'll use my mouse to point here. We got the Coalsack Nebula here, the Eta Carina kind of region here, just looking at the southern part of the Milky Way. More stuff that I was going to look up before the talk to remember what they were, and forgot to do that. So yeah, just really cool southern sky stuff that we got to see through these Dobsonians. Here's another shot of, this is one of the tour groups with the green laser pointer, as you always need, just looking at the star-studded, dark, dark skies. And there's moonlight in this shot too, lighting up the mountains there. I went to Washington State University, and it's kind of, we have this wave the flag thing where at every ESPN game day, there's somebody in the background of the ESPN game day, college game day booth, waving a cougar flag. So people take their flags all over the world to really cool places. So I brought my flag down and got a picture with this enormous Dobsonian, which I'll talk about in a bit, just, you know, for fun. In addition to the astrophotography I was doing, which I'll talk about in a second, I ran around with my other DSLR and my 35mm lens, got some really sweet pictures. I had to wait till like 3 a.m. to get the Milky Way to be low enough to get some foreground in the shot. But that's Jupiter there on the bottom. You can see the pipe, the Bowl and Pipe Nebula there. A little more of the part of the Milky Way you're familiar with. I think that's the lagoon there and the Trifid. And that's one of his giant Dobsonians in the foreground. One of my favorite pictures from the week. We got a chance to observe the Magellanic Clouds as they rose in the wee hours of the morning. One of the most stunning things that we observed of all the stunning southern hemisphere things you can see was the Tarantula Nebula. Now the Tarantula Nebula is actually in the Large Magellanic Cloud, like not just in between us and it, but actually in it. So it's like, you know, whatever, 150,000 light years away. And despite that great distance, it's still enormous. It, you know, depending on the size of the telescope and the focal length of your eyepiece, it can fill up your entire eyepiece and more. And it's just this highly structured, bright enough to see color, you know, some blues and teals. No red, we tried, couldn't see the red, that was sad. But lots of blues and teals, and just this really intricate structure. You could just stare at it forever. There was just so much to see. So in addition to all the visual observing that we did, I, of course, did all my astrophotography because I have to. It's like a compellment of my life. So I had rented a telescope, a Takahashi FSQ 106 on a Skywatcher mount, but the mount ended up having an issue early in the week. So I set up my Star Adventurer instead with my DSLR, and in exchange for the telescope not working, Alan let me borrow his Sony A7S modified mirrorless camera and his Rokinon 135mm f2 lens, which is one heck of a setup, because let me show you these pictures because they're totally mind-blowing. I'm so glad I let me borrow that. Like, I have to get a setup like that for myself. It was incredible. So this is actually, before I show the ones from the Sony camera, this is one I took on my DSLR that I had on the Star Tracker. This is probably like I think this is a 30-second or a 60-second exposure. And this is the first one that I took that week. And I just about fell over when I saw that. Like, I actually froze in whatever I was doing, mid-action, at just how incredible this picture was, just this one shot. Seeing so much detail in the Milky Way. I mean, getting out to a dark site at high altitude, you just have to do it at some point, whether it's in the US or somewhere else. So this is the one picture I got on the Takahashi before the mount quit working of Centaurus A. I managed to get, so I think I've got the statistics on the next slide. Yeah, here we go. A little over 3 hours on this one with the monochrome camera. Now you can see this from the southern part of the United States, but it's obviously much higher in the sky from Chile, so I got to visually observe that. Excuse me, and also get some images of it. Now that Sony mirrorless camera with that Rokinon lens was something else. So the stars were pinpoint almost all the way to the edge. It had excellent red response because it was modified camera. This here is the infamous Eta Carina Nebula over there on the left, and the so-called Running Chicken Nebula over there on the right. And just so many stars because it's in the band of the Milky Way, and all this interlacing dark nebula. In addition to those two main highlights, there's a number of open clusters, the Southern Pleiades, the Pearl Cluster, one that doesn't have a name, it's just NGC 3532, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I didn't bother to go label the picture with because, like, you wouldn't have been able to see the picture. A lot of stuff going on here. This was a 21-minute exposure of a whole bunch of 30-second exposures, like with this camera. Heck yeah, that's what I'm all about right there. Now the lens wasn't really well seated. It's this Rokinon lens that's on like a Canon to Sony adapter, and it was kind of wobbling around a bit. So the stars didn't look as good in this one, but here's a close-up of the Large Magellanic Cloud taken on that same rig. A little over 2 hours for this one. This is one I took on my own camera of both of them, the large and small Magellanic Clouds. And up on the left, at like the 11 o'clock position of the small Magellanic Cloud there is the 47 Tucanae, which is another famous, really incredible globular cluster. And I think that globular cluster actually belongs to the small Magellanic Cloud. I have to go double check on that one. But if so, then it's especially enormous and ridiculous. I have to go check that one. Yeah, so another really cool shot. This was just under 2 hours on my own camera. Another shot from my own camera with the probably 35mm lens. I don't have it listed here. Of a little more familiar part of the Milky Way, but it's usually quite low in the sky for Astro. Ophiuchi here, M7, and Jupiter, ruining the shot. But it was quite high in the sky down there, which was really cool. Oh, I do have that information. Yeah, that was the 35mm lens, yeah. Another shot with the Sony camera and the Rokinon lens. I mean, just like, remember that all of that like kind of yellowish light in the Milky Way, those are all like individual stars. Just, again, it's hard to like comprehend that. It's just absolutely nuts. And all the interlacing dark nebula there, the familiar M8 and M20 Lagoon and Trifid Nebula among many other familiar sights. But up at zenith, it's sort of, 20 degrees up off the horizon. A little under 2 hours for that one. And finally, my favorite image that I got of all my dark sky stuff that week is the Rho-Ophiuchi complex. Now, I've been trying to image this for quite a long time. And I've even, like, one of my previous better shot of this was at the Texas Star Party, so dark skies, with a camera lens with my DSLR on top of my telescope mount. And I was taking 10-minute exposures. And I still didn't get anything near as good as this, which was done with 30-second exposures. This is less than a half an hour of total exposure. I mean, A, is dark, so you can just get a whole lot more signal, and B, this camera and lens combination, which was phenomenal. I swear I have no affiliation with Sony or Rokinon, but yeah, it was just awesome. So having good equipment, in addition to having dark skies, you kind of need both of those things to get the really incredible images. All right, so a note on the big giant telescope here, and I'm almost done. This is my second to last slide. So this telescope, this is a 45-inch Dobsonian telescope, home built by Alan, the guy who owns that observatory / hotel conglomeration. And it'd been some years of effort, and he was still working on it while we were down there. And we actually got to have first light on this behemoth in the very final hours before we hopped in the car and left the country to go home at the end of our time. And this is the largest telescope in South America for amateur use. Obviously, there's a lot of big telescopes for professional use in South America, but this is currently the largest for amateur use, this 45-inch. And actually, in addition to this behemoth, he's got an even larger one in the works. He acquired a 72-inch mirror that was supposed to go up on some US government satellite or something, but it had just this little tiny imperfection on the edge of the mirror, so they rejected it, and there's another one that I presumably ended up going up into space. But he's got this 72-inch like spy satellite mirror that he's going to build just this enormous Dobsonian out of. So we're already making plans to go back for when it is complete. We did get to, this one wasn't quite collimated yet, but we got to look at the Tarantula Nebula before we set out to go back home through the largest amateur telescope in South America, getting first light. So that was really cool. It wasn't balanced yet, so we were having to hold up this thing while we were taking turns looking through the eyepiece. But it was really cool. Yeah, so with that, we hopped in the car, drove to Calama, and flew to Santiago, and flew home. So that was our 2 weeks in Chile. Incredible dark skies, incredible solar eclipse, incredible people and good times, and lots of pisco. Really a lot of pisco and a lot of wine. There's a lot of wine down there. You gotta warm. It was wintertime. You gotta warm up on those cold nights. You gotta keep warm, keep a steady supply of wine coming. Yeah. So this is probably the most epic space selfie I've taken of myself in front of one of the Dobsonian telescopes there. And this is all the places you can find me on social media to kind of keep up with my adventures. I blog fairly regularly. I've got all this detail and more from this trip up there. And I've got my Astrobin gallery and my social media sites. So with that, are there any questions?
Very good. Thanks, Molly. Just to remind everybody, if you hover your cursor near the bottom of your screen, you can see there'll be a little box that says chat. That'll come up on your monitor, and you can enter your questions through the chat room. So we do have some questions that have come in, Molly. Tim Clark was kind enough to enter too. He indicated you talked about the telescope rentals at the Atacama Desert Lodge. Can you elaborate on you talked about some of them, but what was the cost? What was the quality of the instruments that you used? A little more detail, maybe.
I can't exactly remember what the cost was, because there was a group of 5 of us, and we kind of went in together on a couple of telescopes. It's really pretty reasonable. I think for the course of the whole week, my share, actually no, the total price, and I think he charged us something about $150 for like 2 Dobsonians that we used and the Sony camera that I borrowed as a replacement for the Takahashi that ended up not working, which I think is, you know, pretty reasonable for all 5 of us over like, I think we were there for 6 nights. So yeah, and I don't remember what the lodging rate was, but you know, this isn't like the Hilton or anything, so also pretty reasonable. I'd have to go look back at my spreadsheet that I had. The instruments, I mean, I'm not really a visual observer. I'm a photographer, so I don't have a lot of context. I personally enjoyed the views in them. He had some fancy eyepieces that he let us borrow, and then like some regular eyepieces. And yeah, he had all the eyepieces and stuff there. He had Dobbs ranging in size from probably like 12 inches up to, well, there's the 45 inch that he just turned on, but we used a 24-inch Dob quite a lot and a 27-inch Dob quite a lot that delivered some really spectacular views. One in particular, Jupiter, again, being up at zenith, and it being so clear and so dark and so such high altitude, very steady desert singing, that had to have been the sharpest, finest view of Jupiter that I've ever seen or probably ever will see, unless I go back down again, through the 24-inch Dob down there. And yeah, definitely unforgettable. In fact, it was so dark there that Jupiter kind of ruined your night vision a little bit. Whenever you looked at it, you just kind of felt blinded. Yeah, so actually, I really recommend going there. Now, you do have to contend with the fact that since he does do these nightly observatory tours, there is one Dobsonian that's off away from all the others that you can use, but you can't use the telescopes up at the front where he does the tours until after the tours are done at about 1 o'clock in the morning or so. So there's that consideration, but it's pretty easy access from Calama, which has an airport, to get out there. It's about a little over an hour from Calama, hour or 2, something like that. It's near the town of San Pedro de Atacama, where you can go for gas and food and water. Actually, he has water out there that he provides for you. Other supplies and stuff you need. And also in the vicinity of a whole bunch of things to do during the day, a whole bunch of really cool Atacama desert sites, like the Valley of the Moon is nearby. The salt flats are nearby. There's things to go see in San Pedro de Atacama. Yeah, so I actually really recommend staying there, getting to use those telescopes and enjoying the dark skies.
Very good. We have a couple more questions that have come in. Just to remind everybody, if you click on the chat box at the bottom center of your monitor on the toolbar, you can enter questions to Molly in there. The other question Tim had commented on is, were there any clouds? Or is as dry as it is down there that you referred to? Did you ever have any impediment of the seeing?
At night, there were some clouds, but in fact, it was hard to tell whether they were clouds because it was dark enough that they were black. They generally kind of stayed low on the horizon, though. I would say that every night was clear, just with a couple that were floating down near the horizon. During the day, there'd be a few high-altitude ones floating through, but because it's in this rain shadow between these 2 mountain ranges, any clouds that do manage to make it over the mountain range are very thin, move pretty quick, and don't stick around very long.
Very good.
So I don't remember exactly how many clear nights they said they had, but it's like a vast majority of the nights over the course of the year.
We have a question from Eric. He says, I think the Sony A7S camera does 4K video and can take a decent video of the night sky. Did you try taking any video, or was it just still frames?
I did not try taking any video. It's being a mirrorless camera, it had that really sensitive sensor, and if you happen to spot the ISO values I used, I probably could have pushed a lot higher. I guess the noise is quite low on those, but since I didn't have a whole lot of time to experiment, I just went with values I was familiar with and was imaging targets the whole time. So I did not try the video, but based on the performance of just 30-second long images at a relatively low ISO for that camera, you could probably get some good video out of that, I would guess.
When this is a question for me, is I was thinking about the process to get the trip together. How does the Atacama hotel, does it book up a lot?
I don't know. I mean, it wasn't. I don't even think it was. It was full when we were there, and actually we had to wait a couple of days to get up there, which is why we took the road trip, because a lot of people were down there for the eclipse. But I think over the course of the rest of the year, probably less so. I'm not really sure, actually. But Alan is pretty responsive if you contact him on his website to questions and inquiries and stuff like that. So he'd obviously have the read on that.
Okay. Just remind everybody again, if you click on the little chat box at the bottom of your video monitor, that you can enter your questions there, and they'll pop up over here on my screen. Molly, did you have any problems with customs or transiting countries or checking materials in and out? I know usually when you're carrying a lot of high power electronics equipment, sometimes it set off a flag with, you know, the local security.
Yeah, so I forgot to tell that story when I was talking about the gear. So I didn't have any real issues, no. When I was leaving the States, when I was leaving the Midwest, my carry-on suitcase I had one carry-on suitcase that had all like the gear in it besides the cameras, which I had in my backpack, and that had the backpack with the Star Adventurer and all the cables and all the lithium batteries and just like all the stuff. And the security folks did ask to open it up and look at it, because on the X-ray scanner they said it looked like a black hole. There's just so much metal in there they couldn't even see what was in there. And when I explained, you know, it's camera equipment for the solar eclipse, they're like, yeah, you know, that's fine. And they didn't even, you know, dig through it. I just like, hey, look, it's camera equipment. They're like, okay, cool. When I was leaving, let's see, on one of the flights inside of Chile, I did have to. They did ask like what it was, but since everybody in Chile knew about the eclipse, I was just. In fact, I don't even. Like I just said like, oh, it's in Spanish. It's equipment for imaging the eclipse, and they're like, oh yeah, because you know everybody who they'd seen at the airport that day had equipment for imaging the solar eclipse. So yeah, they asked to look, but I didn't have any problems. No, you just got to remember to put all the lithium batteries have to go in your carry-on. Oh, it's the same as in the States. And I tried to lay things out in a way that kind of in layers. That way it's easier to, you know, if they do want to go through it, they can kind of see what's in there. And just trying to, you know, bring anything that, I mean, I even brought tools. Like I brought screwdriver and hex wrenches and stuff like that. And I think I actually had those in the carry-on suitcase, and like it wasn't a problem.
So much for the benefit of advertising on the sides of garbage cans and everything else, so everybody's aware of it, huh?
Yeah. So I didn't have any trouble with security at all. Partly because everybody knew, you know, at least in Chile, what was going on. And then on the state side, I was like, yeah, it's, you know, camera equipment. I'm going to South America to image the eclipse. And like, oh, that's really cool. Yeah. So
you mentioned tools, and anybody that's done a field event or star party in the field knows that Murphy is probably the primary person that's going to show up there.
Yeah.
Did you, aside from the failures of equipment that you had, did your equipment work normally?
Yeah, actually, all my stuff worked, you know, because I brought redundancy. I brought extra batteries. I brought extra CR2032 batteries for finders. I brought, I didn't have to use the tools at all, except for polar aligning the Star Adventurer, which requires a hex wrench. But let's see. Yeah, all my stuff worked. I was able to transfer my data over. I did transfer my data off. I copied my data off the memory cards onto a backup external hard drive every day. just in case. And I backed up everybody else in my group's data too, because memory cards are really small and easily corruptible. So thanks to all my pre-planning of like bringing extra stuff, having my battery chargers, all of my gear, I forgot to mention this too, all of my gear, anything that charges things is generally dual voltage. So I didn't even have to bring a voltage converter. I just brought plug converters because pretty much everything that recharges things is already dual voltage. So I didn't have to bring any voltage converters. And those are probably the biggest failure source among electronics when traveling to foreign countries is voltage converters. So if you can, I even got the recharger for my camera batteries. I got like a USB pluggable one so that I could charge it just on a USB charger, which is dual voltage. I just brought a whole bunch of USB chargers.
Very good. Okay, we have another question come in from Eric. He says, I may have missed it mentioned, but was curious about how many people do you think were there on the Center Island eclipse where you were at?
Oof. I think at the site that we were at, scattered over the whole area, probably hundreds, if not over 1,000. I think I'm trying to remember. The local newspaper reported that there was some like 140,000 people who came to the La Serena area, which doubled. That's the population of the city. So the population doubled in the span of a week. And then there was even more people who were inland. And I think the national estimate for people who came in to all parts to see the eclipse was like 1.5 million or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know for the Great American Eclipse, I went up to a little town called Victor, Idaho, which is on the west side of the Tetons, population 1,600. And on the day of the eclipse, there was 22,000 people descended on this poor village. Fortunately, I was way out in the country, so I didn't have to deal with that too much. Okay, other questions? It looks like we're coming down to the end of it here. Any final comments, Molly? This was a great presentation. Awesome.
Thanks.
Pictures,
yeah.
Stunning.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, definitely if you ever get the chance to go see the southern sky from anywhere, Africa, Australia, South America, it's definitely a great opportunity. Chile prides itself in being unlike the rest of its South American neighboring countries in its like level of developing countryness. So Chile's roads are really well maintained. They don't have the levels of like corruption and crime that a lot of other South American countries have. They really kind of pride themselves on being like trying to set the standard for South America. So Chile's, I mean, there were some political uprisings and stuff earlier, like in Santiago, like late last year. But on the whole, probably one of the safer South American countries to go to. And we didn't have any problems while we were there. We had a very smooth experience. So Chile is a great country to go to if you don't want to fly all the way to like Australia.
Let's see, I got another note came in here. Jerry Hyatt says he's not ready for it to end. He wants to see more pictures.
I have a lot more pictures. I just, didn't want, to go on until 2 o'clock in the morning, right?
So, personal question, when do you plan to go back?
We had bounced around the idea, obviously, well before COVID, of going for because the 2020, there's an eclipse in December of this year in the southern part of Chile, down in like the Patagonia region. I already said I couldn't go because that was going to be like finals time for me being in classes. So, because it's right around Christmas. It's like I don't know, like the 20th of December or something like that. So we had talked about going back then. I don't know. I do, like, I've been to South America twice and I've never been to Europe. So I think my next trip's going to be somewhere besides South America. But I would definitely like to go back, and I would definitely go back to the Atacama Lodge, and hopefully Winnie's got that 72-inch behemoth built.
It sounds like fun. Well, when you go to Europe, make sure you take those little transformers with you, because I can testify they were a lifesaver in England, Germany, and France.
Yeah.
All right. No more questions have come in. So at that point, I think I'm going to turn it over to Mike, our president.
Okay, you're on.
Okay. Jeff has an announcement as far as the raffle here.
Dougie Christensen, you still here?
It looks like he's checked out there.
I'm pretty sure I said you had to stick it out, didn't I?
You did.
So, here we go.
I'm here.
Oh, where are you?
Wait.
Oh, boy. I had already tossed it. Congratulations, Dougie. You won tonight.
All right.
I don't know
Well,
what
I won because I got to watch Molly's presentation. She was wonderful.
I don't know what I'm going to see you, Dougie, but I'll have a Starbucks card for you.
All right, I can drink that.
Yeah. Well, I don't think you want to drink the card. You might exchange it for a drink and drink the drink.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Congratulations, Dougie.
Hey, hope you guys are all well. I'm up in Strawberry. I'm doing great.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
No pain.
Great. We know about you. Great.
That was the other night. That was the other night. Not tonight.
Sure.
But my buddy Dave left and took most of the alcohol with him, so you know.
Fred, do you have any other business or anything? I don't have anything.
No, I really don't have anything. We had quite a turnout. There's 27 people online to visit with Molly and her fantastic pictures. I know I'm friends with Molly on Facebook, and every time I click to see what's going on, some image that she's just shot or something like that pops up. So if you have Facebook or Instagram, definitely friend her, because some of the things she posts are pretty spectacular. So
Anyway, I want to thank you, Molly. I think everyone agrees we'd love to have you back again if you have time.
Yeah, sorry, there's just a really loud firework right outside my window. Yeah, I love to come back. I love speaking on either fun topics like this or science topics, which are also fun.
You want to make me
or
go back?
astrophotography, all kinds of stuff.
I went to Berkeley a million years ago, back during the wild times in the late 60s.
Oh man.
And I'd love to go back, but my brain doesn't work anymore. So we'll leave it to young people like yourselves to go ahead and pick up those advanced degrees.
I think, Nahir, you've now had enough meetings that you can get your Striking Sparks certificate, your paper signed off.
I don't know if you can hear it.
Yeah, okay.
I'll chime in here. I did mention that to Nahir earlier today that, yeah, we would try to set up a safe and small meeting to bring his telescope to him. But we'll have to wait for Doug to get back from Strawberry so we can get the lettering on it.
Not a problem. Hey, while I'm talking, I might as well just add in Jerry, Jeff, Mike. You guys did a great job of putting this together, and Molly did a great job, and 27 people on the participating. I think this was an unabashed success.
Yeah.
Kudos to all you guys.
I want to say one thing about Fred. I remember last year we were talking about doing something like this. Fred brought it up. I think most of us, especially me, were going, that's never going to work. COVID came along, and all of a sudden, Fred is a genius. Thank you, Fred. You did a good job.
it's the new us.
Yeah.
There you go.
You guys are all we're all two-dimensional now.
Yeah. That sums it up pretty good, really.
I'm going to say something. I'm going to go back out to Jack Tone Road again tomorrow morning and get this comet with a little bit better photographic stuff, because this comet is actually pretty good.
Yeah, you guys, if you get a chance, everybody, check out the SAS website on Facebook, because there's a ton of pictures out there on the comet now.
Hey, since that subject was brought up, I had a fielded a email from Clifford Oda, who's the photographer for the record. And he went out this morning and he got a beautiful shot of Venus right in the middle of the Hyades, but he was asking me how to get the comet. And so I'm going to email him again and give him, Fred, I'm going to give him your number and Jeff's number and let him know that he can contact you guys.
Yeah, that's fine. Just though it's much easier, just tell him to turn left 45 degrees. There it is.
That's basically what I told him. But like I didn't
Molly's laughing because she knows I'm right.
Yeah, I told him it looked like it was 45 degrees, a little north and up. So.
And it's really low in the horizon too.
Yeah.
Doug, the big problem with Columbia and also Strawberry is the fact that it's hard to see through the mountains higher than we are.
Yeah, you definitely got to get some level horizons.
And
Yeah, I don't have
how fast that dawn is up the sky.
So if you're going to go watch the comet, I've been watching it for tomorrow morning will be day number 5. The tail is definitely growing bigger and bigger, and it's getting very pronounced. I think it's within 4 days of perihelion or something like that, before it swings around the sun. So if you want to see a really bright comet, I mean, it's not like a Hale-Bopp or anything like that, but this thing is really obvious in the morning sky. Really pretty.
2020, comets bring disasters to society. It's just a perfect time.
Harbinger of death.
Now let's see the bright side of things.
Okay.
I'll be out early tomorrow morning up at Point Richmond trying to get across the water. So we'll see.
You know, if the water's smooth, you might get 2 comets.
Oh man, that'd be so sick.
Cool.
So, all right, Jerry,
Hey,
I'll
guys.
turn it back over to you.
Oh, well, I don't really have anything to say. Got a fantastic presentation, Molly. Really appreciated your coming out here to Stockton tonight.
It was a real long drive.
Yeah, and the ride home is going to be easy.
Yeah.
And
Well, when you're out here, we still owe you dinner.
there
Yeah,
you go.
hoping to, love to actually, come out and give a talk in person at some point. I'll be here for the next couple of years, so hopefully someday when this is all over.
You can come tell us about neutrinos too.
Yeah, I can give a fun neutrino talk. That'd be fun.
That actually would be a very fascinating talk. I think that'd be
Usually
good.
I would
check
really
covering your travel
appreciate that.
expenses, so you get a check for $0.
Neutrinos worth.
Yeah, it's the new age of multi-messenger astronomy, and fascinating quick fact is that neutrinos from a supernova arrive before the light does, because they're produced before the light is produced. So it's actually a signal we can use to be able to move the telescopes over to a supernova about to happen and actually catch it on the upswing, which is really hard to do. So fascinating times we're in.
Hey, can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Do neutrinos react to an index of refraction when they pass through space?
So they're very weakly interacting, like, that's part of the reason why, there's a big neutrino detector in Antarctica, and it's looking like through the Earth. But in a bit of a different way. So you're kind of you're playing with some statistics with neutrinos, because they interact so rarely that actually you have a higher chance of detecting them if they've already gone through a whole bunch of thick material like the Earth. And they change flavor as they move through space as well. The longer, when they travel a certain distance, they start to change from being electron neutrinos to a mix of electron, mu, and tau neutrinos. You can kind of think of it as index of refraction, I think, although having a little bit of a different effect. They're not being deflected or change in energy like light is with index of refraction, but instead are having a higher chance of interacting with anything and changing flavor.
Well, I know that light's electromagnetic and neutrinos aren't, and so depending on the wavelength of the light, it will bend differently when they pass through another medium. But I didn't know if there would be a case where a neutrino and a photon would be having a race, and when they went through material, the photons would slow down because of an index of refraction, and the neutrino would not.
Yes, yeah, that would happen.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah. And actually, one of the signals we look for in neutrino detectors is Cherenkov light, where if you're unfamiliar, anyone with Cherenkov light is when the speed of light in water, let's see, let me get the description right. You know that blue light that comes from like reactors and stuff like that? Because
that's Cherenkov radiation.
Yeah, the electron's traveling faster than light in the local medium. So you get this this blue glow instead because the speed of light has literally slowed down in the medium. So yeah, that would definitely happen because neutrinos are going to plow through that water more or less unaffected unless you get lucky and it decides to interact with something in the water, which is what we look for when we're detecting neutrinos, is that one interacts somewhere in there.
Gamma rays. How to detect gamma rays coming through the atmosphere?
As far as
there's some Cherenkov radiation.
Mm-hmm.
From the electrons they excite when they come to the atmosphere.
Yeah. Yeah, neutrinos are. I'm just getting into it, so still a lot of stuff to learn about them. But there's a lot that we've learned just in the last decade or two from all these experiments, and we know that they have mass, but we don't know what the mass is yet. So that's kind of the next big question.
A lot.
We know it's very tiny.
All right. Any parting words, Mike?
Yeah, I just want to again thank you. Wish you the very best in your studies. Hope to see you soon.
Yeah, and I'm happy to come on and do another talk on really a wide variety of things. So yeah, I'll get in touch with Brad.
Hey Molly, I know you went to WC. I grew up in Albion.
Oh really?
I did.
Oh wow, that's a small little town.
It was smaller in 1963. We had 200 people back then.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I've been up to Albion once. My sister was getting her concealed carry permit, and there was a guy there who was authorized to issue them, so that's where we went.
Yeah, when I lived there, there was 200 people there. There's probably a couple thousand now.
It was still seemed like a pretty small town, but yeah, that's really neat. Yeah, I grew up in Spokane.
I went to high school in Spokane.
Oh yeah, which school?
Dana Park High School.
Oh yeah. I went to university.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, I was out in the valley there.
I'm sure everybody else is really interested in this too.
So for everybody's information, Shadle Park High School, on the grounds of the school, is a massive water tower that's painted the colors of the school. This green and this really vivid green and yellow, and it's just this enormous water tower. But it's not like up high; it's just like on the ground, and it's on the grounds of the school. It's very weird.
Yeah, back then I think that tower must have gone up in the late '60s, but that was, instead of getting gravity feed, they just filled the tank and let the air pressure inside the tank supply the pressure.
Oh, interesting.
All right, everybody, I'm gonna have to bail out of here. Molly, thanks so much.
Yeah,
great
absolutely.
talk.
Thank
and
you.
I'll talk with everybody a little later.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you, Molly.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Molly. Thanks for being here with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a good night.
Very good. Very good.
Thank you.
All right. Well,
Why don't we leave it, just stick around for the phone? Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna flip off.
okay, I'm going to end it all unless anyone has anything else to say.
Oh, I'm gonna end it all.
That's it, yeah. Oh, I had one question.
I got a squirt gun. You want to use it?
I had one question for you, Paul.
Yeah, go.
You said it's hard to see because the mountains are higher than you are. How high are you?
It's The thing is, it's the ridge. I'm at 2573 right here, but the ridge that's to the east of me is running over 3,000, 3,500, up to 4,000. And I know the strawberry, it's kind of the same situation unless you're up on the ridge.
All right. Well,
And thanks, Jerry. Thanks for having us.
good night, everyone. Hope Joanna's doing well.
Well, she's in the other thing. We're watching. I just got done watching a comedy on television.
Very good. Very good. All right. Good night, all.
Good night.
Signing off.